Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Short-Term Show special episode series on the high country of North Carolina. So we are going to be doing a 10-episode deep dive into everything you need to know about buying a short-term rental in this market. And we do have a few supplemental materials for y'all to check out over on our website. So any information that you need on pricing of short-term rental properties in this market, you can find it on our website at theshorttermshop.com. You can also find income data thanks to our friends over at airdna.com. You can find that on our website, again, at theshorttermshop.com. If you guys are interested in buying a short-term rental property with a short-term shop agent in this market, you can email us at agents@theshorttermshop.com, or you can join our Facebook group. We've created an amazing community with over 50,000 people where we talk about all short-term rental investing all day, every day. And you can join that. The name of the group is the same title as my book, Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. And we look forward to seeing you over there. Thanks, y'all. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Short-Term Show market-specific podcast. This edition is the high country of North Carolina. Today, we're starting at the beginning. We're going to be talking about why the hell would you want to invest in the high country of North Carolina? Why would you want to buy a short-term rental here? So we've got a panel of experienced experts. That was redundant, but I've got a great panel of knowledgeable folks on here. I'll let them introduce themselves. First, we have Garrett Simmons. Garrett, introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hey, Avery. Sure some of you guys have heard me before, maybe not on some form of Avery's podcast publications. I am an agent on Avery's team up in the high country of North Carolina, which kind of encompasses the northwest corner of the state. Appalachian State is our claim to fame. Boone, Banner Elk, Blowing Rock area, about an hour and a half north of Charlotte, 2 hours, hour and a half-ish north of Asheville. I own investment properties, have helped a ton of clients buy short-term rentals specifically up in the area, and have been up here for a little over a decade on and off since school. So know the area well, and excited to be on this morning.
Thanks, Garrett. Next, we have Mr. Joe Prilliman. You may know him from a number of different places because he pops up literally everywhere. Even before he was on this team, I would see him everywhere. So Joe, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, wow. That was wonderful. Thank you, Avery. My name's Joe Prilliman. I'm a real estate investor, mainly doing short-term vacation rentals in Carolina Beach and actually up in Banner Elk, North Carolina. So we've been building our portfolio since 2018, mixed in some long-term rentals and midterm rentals as well. But we're up to 16 properties, 21 doors, and kind of keep rocking and rolling from there. I'm also a real estate agent. I'm on Avery's team as well. I work down here in the Carolina Beach market and specializing in helping people lock in some killer short-term rentals. It's the name of the game.
Thanks, Joe. And next we have Brad Burcham. Brad, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Avery. Glad to be on the podcast with you. I'm a financial advisor in Tennessee, but I'm an extensive real estate investor, have 9 short terms and 17 long terms. So I guess that's 26 doors. And they're all over the Southeast, the Gulf Coast, and in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, and Brad's probably the biggest baller here because he's having a house built in Big Sky. So, I mean, that's high roller stuff.
Come on.
All right. So we are going to talk about today. So all these guys own stuff in Western North Carolina in the high country. And we're going to talk about why you might be interested in, or why a person might invest in the high country. So what are some of the attractions? We'll start there. What are the attractions of the high country?
Yeah, absolutely. This could be a long-winded answer. I think it's a good reason, a good thing. I know, Avery, you always talk about kind of trying to target these markets that have just more than one attraction and one thing, which the high country definitely does. I would say compared to some beach markets and some other areas of the country, we're going to be a little bit less seasonal than some other areas. And when I say that, right now it's really busy in the Banner Elk, Beach Mountain, Sugar Mountain area based on the ski resorts. So if you are in the Southeast and don't want to hop on an airplane to go skiing or snowboarding, you're going to drive up to our areas. It's the only area in Mountain that is kind of worth doing any skiing and snowboarding. So we can kind of cast a wide net in the wintertime. Even people from Tennessee that would maybe vacation to the Smokies in the summertime are going to drive out to Banner Elk and Beach Mountain because there's just not much skiing and snowboarding out in the Tennessee area. We're about 3 times the elevation of a Gatlinburg. So that the temperatures are going to be a lot cooler year round, obviously freezing in the wintertime, which garners all that snow. Then the summertime, it's going to be rarely in the 80s. So people can escape from the rest of North Carolina and where it's really hot and humid. Typically, that's the people that are going to be vacationing up here. And I know we can get into that in a little bit, but in the summertime, people are coming up to hike, to fly fish, to whitewater raft, to golf, to float, to go to some of the national parks up here, to sit at a winery, to go really sometimes just to beat the heat and get out of, Charlotte, Raleigh, some of these other metro areas of North Carolina. In the fall football season, Appalachian State kicks up school season, which now has over 20,000 undergrad where I went to school. So that has been a huge, huge reason for attraction year round. People coming up for football games. A lot of the alumni is still local and lives in the state and can get behind the games in the fall. You have a lot of family coming to visit as the university gets super big around the Boone and Blowing Rock area. Is super popular during the school year. I know my parents came up several times a year to visit me and my friends when I was in school. So again, you don't have students staying in your short-term rentals typically, but the families and friends visiting them is a really big attraction. So yeah, that's going to be kind of starting in the fall. I would say, Thanksgiving is kind of the start of the Christmas snow season. You got people coming up to chop down a Christmas tree. Avery County is one of the largest Christmas tree providers in the country. Believe it or not, the White House sometimes gets their tree from this area. So people come up for mountain weekends. You got families, even if they're not skiing and snowboarding, that maybe want to show their kids some snow because there's going to be some snow on the ground when it flurries in Charlotte. We might get 6 inches in Boone or Banner Elk. So that's just a couple of the reasons that people are coming up here. I would say the biggest difference from maybe the Smokies is going to be a little bit less commercialized, colder, and a couple. The university is going to be a big attraction, and a little bit smaller, less of a some sort of hybrid between Gatlinburg and a place in the woods. We still have a Walmart, so somewhere a happy medium there.
Yeah. So you're saying that it's a little bit of a combination between a vacation market and a college market. So I find that to be somewhat attractive because, you do want to be able to capitalize on football games and things like that. But also you have the vacation aspect of it. So you're not like fully dependent on either thing, which is cool because none of our other markets are like that.
Right. Right. And I would even say, I know we can get into a little bit with Brad and Joe, which are, it's good to have both of them on because they both own properties up here, but in a little bit different location. And I would say, I know some other conversations we've had with some panelists, we've talked about the market being a little bit split, which I think it is as far as the demand. Places where Joe's area out in Banner Elk is going to be a little bit closer to the ski slopes. So the wintertime is going to be really popular and a lot more popular. Brad's place, while he's still, I'm sure, getting bookings now in the summertime, being close to Boone and Blowing Rock, typically is going to get a little bit more traffic. And so he could be a little bit more crowded in the spring and summertime where Joe could be a little bit more crowded in the wintertime. And that really can just come from only having a couple roads, from a helicopter or Google Maps. It looks like it's all in the same place, but it could take you, 45 minutes just to get from potentially Joe's place from Brad's place, Joe's to Brad's place, depending on the time of year and the traffic.
Do you other guys have anything else to add on attractions and things that attract people to the area?
Oh my gosh. Can you tell Garrett's been there 10 years? That was incredible. Across the board, he hit like all the main highlights on the whole thing. Like, I mean, to the T, like just to reiterate on that, like that is one of the main reasons why I went for that area was I was trying to offset my other portfolio and I want something that was a little more steady Eddie, but like I got beach properties, like they are empty in the winter, completely empty. And when you're wrapping money around it every time and you're like, oh, I feel great at the end of the summer, but I've got to make this last the whole time. I wanted something to offset my portfolio, and Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham is what dictates my investment decisions right now. So many people are moving into North Carolina, and all those people want to go ski somewhere. And that's the closest place you can go for anything remotely close to what a lot of these people are used to skiing. And so they're going to continually go up there repeatedly. It just made sense to me.
what I was going to ask, well, I do have a question, but I want to revert back to something else. So I think that you make a really good point, Joe, in that a lot of the other markets that we operate in are summer high seasons. So this is a really cool market because it's a winter high season mostly, right? So if you've already got a beach property or somewhere that's high in the summertime, this might be a really good option for you so that you're staggering your high season. So I think that's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. And I would say, I mean, I know, again, I it's going to be dependent on kind of where you are and the type of property you have. But while it can be seasonal in the high season, I would say it's going to be, I always kind of tell people, depending on their property is, it could be 70-30. So if you look at Joe's going to be able to give more accurate numbers on his properties, but his high season might be in the wintertime, but unlike maybe the beach where during the high season, it's 90% of his revenue, it might be something like 70-30, where it's not like your property is going to sit vacant all summer. It's just going to be, the weekdays are going to be a little bit slower during the summer. We are competing with, because of, like Joe said, that's a lot of people from North Carolina that are vacationing here. Well, they go to the beach in the summertime. So we're kind of competing with those people in the summertime that will book a place for a week at the beach versus the wintertime. People are less likely to go down to the beach unless they're property owners, and they'll come up here. And as well, like I mentioned, we can get some people coming from Tennessee and Florida and some longer places that want to go skiing and snowboarding. But I do kind of have a quick question for Brad while he's on here and Avery. Now, Brad obviously has done a lot of stuff in the Smokies, where you guys started, and I get this all the time from people, and I'm interested to hear his opinion on, like, Brad, what is your kind of big difference between the high country and the Smokies? Not even from an investment standpoint, but just from a attraction standpoint when you're at both of them.
So I would say that my initial attraction to the high country was just that it was consistent to some degree all year round. There's something to draw people pretty much every part of the year. There's not, in my opinion, there's not much of a high and low season. It's pretty consistent. But the one thing that I did not factor into it that has been a major driver is App State and the parents and the traveling around App State. That has been, like in January, for instance, I would say 60% of my bookings were parents bringing students back to school and those things. So, it's very consistent and much more so than I had anticipated, which is fantastic. I would say that the elevation is definitely the attraction, the cooler temperatures in the summertime that for myself and for a lot of people in that area, the summers are brutal in the Southeast, in Tennessee and North Carolina and South Carolina. It's so humid and hot. And if I can take a 3-hour drive and go from 95 to 75, that's super attractive. So it's not necessarily the dinner shows and the theme parks and all those things that are super attractive in the Smokies. It's the reverse of that, honestly. It's really the opposite of that.
That's cool.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the Blue Ridge Parkway, like all that jazz. Like, I love going up there. Like, being born and raised in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It's like, I mean, it's terrible. When Garrett said, escape the summer, he wasn't kidding. It was, we escape to the mountains or to the beach, because you either got to cool off from the humidity or you got to jump in the ocean. And so that's why I invest there.
That's right. Joe, I think when you close in the middle of the summertime, you're like sweating like no other, like coming up with shorts and chacos. And I think it was like we fired up the propane fireplace, like, yo, bring your sweatshirt.
Oh yeah. I really appreciate that. I do sweat a lot. And it was a wonderful way for me to try to keep that from happening. And you promised me it wasn't going to be like hot up there during that time. And the 1 week I'm there, we had like the highest temperatures they've had. And so,
we were worrying about the AC units. We were like,
right. We were talking about AC units, and now I'm over here like, we need to put in more fireplaces. It is dang cold up there. Very, very fun though. Absolutely love it.
So let's talk about the summer, because we talked about the winter. We know there's skiing. Well, actually, I do want to ask one more question about the winter before we move on to that. So is this an area where snow falls and stays on the ground throughout, or for any period of time? Or is it like the rest of the Southeast where it'll dust for a minute and then it's gone?
Right. Great question. I would say somewhere in between. So as far as the ski slopes go, we are going to have enough snow mixed with them being able to blow snow at night when it's cold enough that there will always be some sort of base layer on the ski slopes year round, during the season. So I would say from whenever they open, beginning in December, all the way through. That's typically the end of March, beginning of April. They stay open as long as they can. Granted, sometimes they're better than others. Sometimes it's slushy, sometimes it's icy. So the ski slopes are always going to see snow. The rest of the area, we definitely will have snow that stays, but it is not like I don't know, name your place in Colorado where the first snow comes and from December to March, you can't see the ground because there's snow on the ground. So not like the rest of the state where it snows and everything shuts down for a week and then the snow's gone in 5 hours. I would say it's all based on the temperatures, obviously, but no, we will, like right now, there's not snow on the ground. We had some snow this past weekend and it was there for a day or two and then it was gone. So the ski slopes, you never have to worry about those really shutting down throughout the wintertime. But as far as the roads and your driveway is not going to be, iced over and covered with snow all winter.
That's good to know. All right, back to the summer. What is there to do in the summer? Is this a big golf market? What are people doing when they come in the summertime?
Yeah. So, a couple, not only has it kind of been a mix of a college town and vacation town, historically, this area has really been a true second home vacation town. There's a lot of people from Florida that have second homes, vacation homes, and a lot of really high end neighborhoods that don't have or are not good short-term rentals, don't allow short-term rentals. And so there's kind of a submarket of people that will come up here, snowbirds from Florida. So for those people, yes, golf is huge. I would say that for vacationers, it's not as big just because there's not a lot of public golf. It's a lot of really nice private places that are owned by, that even I rarely get access to from a friend of a friend of a friend. National parks are really huge. I don't really know the numbers as far as how much more or less we have than the Smokies, but we have Grandfather Mountain, which is a really big attraction, kind of an outdoor zoo area / lookout with this mile-high swing bridge. The Linville Gorge. There's a lot of little different hiking trails. You can, off the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is a national highway that runs all the way from Georgia all the way up to West Virginia-ish area. So yeah, all the hiking, whitewater rafting in college. I was a whitewater rafting guide. You can do that out in Eastern Tennessee, but you'll take a bus from downtown Banner Elk. Zip lining. I know I've actually, went with Joe and RTC when she was in town. That's something that you can do year round. Horseback riding, tubing. There's some rivers that you can sit on a float. It's not even rafting, and you get a cooler of beer that floats too, and you tie your rafts together with everybody and you hop on a bus and float down the river out in Nash County and Todd in the summertime. Fly fishing is really big up here. The biggest attraction for fly fishing and trout is cold water, and a lot of the water up here is either snow runoff or comes from the bottom of really, really deep lakes. So the water is cold year round. So that's a really big area. This up through down the Asheville area is really big for fly fishing. So really you name your outdoor activity, you can really do in the summertime. I'm sure I'm missing something, but
the climate, bro, you forgot the climate. 78 degrees.
The climate. Mountain biking. I missed. Yeah. And mountain biking is getting really big. It's really big in the Pisgah, Asheville area, but the ski resorts now change their ski lifts to mountain biking lifts. And so you can, you go up and have downhill mountain biking. Mountain biking is really big up here. But yeah, like Brad said, I mean, I would say as far as needing air conditioning, if you're on Beach Mountain, you rarely need it. I mean, even if you're a place like Brad's or Joe's, if you get a lot of natural sunlight, maybe, there's a couple times in the middle of the day, maybe 15 days a year, 10 days a year, you wish you maybe had air conditioning. I found in my properties historically, I open my windows and at night I'm cold. You can kind of always wear a sweatshirt at night. So yeah, the climate is going to be the biggest draw, in addition to all those activities I just mentioned.
It's true, but there are two words that will dictate your time in the high country, and it's mountain coaster. And I am riding that mountain coaster as hard as I can. And I'm determined to beat my wife in that because she thinks she's faster than me on the mountain coaster. It's not going to happen. It's 5 minutes from my house. And I'm not going to lie, that was a huge reason for me for wanting to be up there because I love me a good mountain coaster.
I forgot there's a mountain coaster. There's some high ropes courses. That's like, I guess Tweetsie Railroad is a little railroad amusement park that's really popular for kids. Gem
for
mining.
Kids?
Yeah.
You kidding me? That place is awesome.
Yeah. The high gravity place. There's some gem mining, incredible. Which I don't know how real is. I'm sure they have that in the Smokies where you can fish through some gems. But Yeah, Joe, I forgot about the roller coaster.
Oh
That's
yeah, dude.
that's
In
a
middle
great thing.
school, I got my first piece of Tiger's Eye up there. Those little gem mines, they 100% throw them in there. Like that was it, man. That was the place. You get to collect rocks. You ride the mountain coaster. Like you just have a blast up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually have a little bit of a traumatic core memory when it comes to gem mining at one of these places. So I was like 5 and I went with a school friend of mine and her parents up there from Atlanta was where we lived at the time when I was a kid. And I couldn't figure out how to like shake the little pan without shaking my whole self. And so everybody that walked by made a comment about me shaking my whole self. And then I've been like, I was super self-conscious and I was like, what am I doing wrong? Why is everybody laughing at me? So now anytime I hear gem mining, I'm like, shudder.
That's hilarious.
Panning for gold thing. I know it's so dumb. The things you remember from a kid. All right. So I think we've hit on a lot of what there is to do there. Where's the majority of the travel coming in? Are they flying in? Are they driving in? Are these mostly North Carolinians? I know Floridians love North Carolina, but where's everybody coming from?
Yeah. Great question. I would say it's definitely split up. If we look from a pie chart perspective, the winter time, a little bit of everywhere. Overall, I would say the majority of people that are going to stay in short-term rentals are going to be coming from North Carolina or something within less than a 4-hour drive. A lot of times it's Charlotte, Raleigh, Winston-Salem, Greensboro. There's a lot of property owners that will kind of parlay because they're so close. They might be a short-term investor. I even have clients that will, kind of be closer to the break-even point because they will use it for, more than just 10 days out of the year. They might be up there for, a combined 5, 6, 7 weeks. So you have a lot of people like that kind of are a second home mixed with vacation home. So I would say, yeah, Charlotte, Raleigh, Winston. I know Joe talked about the whole North Carolina area, just even pre-pandemic. Yeah, North Carolina, people have been flocking to North Carolina. Property values, cost of living is so much less than New York, California. A lot of these tech jobs are moving to the RDU, RTP area. And so, yeah, the people that would vacation to Tahoe that lived in, California are going to come up to the mountains. And the people that were going to, LA, San Diego for the beach are going to go down to Joe's area. So it's going to be a lot of usually a lot of upper middle class, high income earners in the North Carolina area. In the wintertime, we might cast again a little bit bigger of a net because of the ski slopes. You have people coming up from Florida that are either typically driving. Another reason that people drive is that it's hard to fly here. You're usually flying to Charlotte, and that's going to be the closest big airport. And even that, you're going to rent a car, and it's going to be an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on where you're coming up here. So yeah, people typically driving in the summertime. You do have that small the people that are snowbirds that are coming up from Florida. I would say it's less people probably renting that are from Florida, or more than they just have second homes. You'll get a couple people that are renting that maybe are visiting their other friends that do have homes. But yeah, I would say overall, I don't know, Joe, maybe 80% of the guests are going to be from North Carolina. I mean, you probably get more with your.
I'd agree with that. I mean, just kind of across the board, like, and I've got such a clear example because I grew up in Winston. Like in high school, I had a 92 RS Camaro. We take the T-tops off and we drive straight up to Boone, and we go down there, Banner Elk, hit the Blue Ridge like Parkway. Like that's what you did. We had a blast doing it, and it was an hour, 45 minutes. And that was just kind of the ride. And so, Brad, I know you mentioned it too, of just being able to like zip on down there whenever it's hot. And that's what we did growing up in Winston-Salem. It's like you either went to the mountains or the beach. And so definitely a drive-to market across the board.
Right. And I would say it also kind of depends on where you're coming from. For instance, like I know we've talked a little bit about for Beach Mountain, for example, is 45 minutes, a good 45 minutes from Boone. So if you're coming from Raleigh or anywhere east, you're going to Beach Mountain, you were driving through Boone to get to Beach Mountain. So it's, Joe's hour and a half drive he's talking about from Winston. Well, now it's 2 hours and 15 minutes to Beach Mountain because it's that much farther, down here versus if you're coming from Charlotte. Blowing Rock's the first town you hit on 321. There's parts of northern Charlotte you can get to Blowing Rock in an hour and 15 minutes. So that's going to be kind of dependent. If you're coming from Knoxville, kind of the east side, Banner Elk is going to be one of the first towns you hit. Take you a little bit longer to get to Boone or Blowing Rock if you're coming from the east side. So it really kind of all depends on where you're coming from. And that could play a huge role too.
Awesome. That's great information to know where everybody's coming from. So next thing I want to talk about that I know everybody the main reason that people are listening to this. And this will probably be a question mostly for Brad because he owns in a bunch of different areas. So what are the purchase prices like here compared to other areas? And feel free to use numbers, Garrett, if you have any handy. But Brad, can compare from other areas that he owns.
Yeah, I would say that, from a price per square foot, the majority of the homes that I see, if they're a little smaller than other markets, so if you're looking at price per square foot, it's probably similar to some beach markets, Gulf Coast. But the total purchase price is lower because you're purchasing a smaller home. Typically, there aren't a lot of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bedrooms like there are in the Smokies and in Gulf Shores. But my purchase price a year ago was just over $400,000 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and I'm under contract right now for a 3-bed, 3-bath for $530. So new construction, and I added some extra stuff. It probably would have been a little under 500, but we added like a sauna and an awesome outdoor deck and stuff like that. So to really drive bookings, hopefully. So I would say Garrett obviously knows this, but I would say the vast majority of purchases are 300 to 600, with the exception of a few 900s and 1.2 millions that are true second homes or, barely rented. If it's a true short-term rental, I would say it's in the 400 to 600 range.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of times, I mentioned those people coming up from Florida, a lot of these really high-end homes that the local market says is worth 1.5, 1.6 might even be a 2,200 square foot home on top of a mountain that has amazing views. Again, that's not really going to make amazing sense from a short-term rental, but it's going to be worth that because of somebody that's looking for a second home. And a lot of these houses that are super big are not going to be in an area or a neighborhood that even allows short-term rentals. So yeah, that sweet spot, if you can find a house that's 8 bedrooms that is on its own, I'm sure it would really crush it. But, yeah, a lot of the sweet spots, I don't know what the average purchase price was last year, but I would say it was probably somewhere in the 500, 450 area. And in my opinion, it's probably going to be the best bang for your buck.
And that's great because that is comparatively quite low compared to a lot of other comparable markets. The Smokies, being the most obvious one to compare it to because it's the biggest one that's the closest. So, that's quite a bit less than the average purchase price in the Smokies. So that's a really great option.
And I would say too, I know it probably applies in the Smokies, maybe more here because of the elevation, but my brother's a builder and he's kind of been telling me lately about how, there's certain fixed costs that come from building properties. No matter if the house is 200 square feet or 6,000 square feet versus, if you got a $50,000 driveway, it could be a $50,000 driveway, depending on the land, depending on how big a house, the well, it needs water, depending on how deep you have to go, could cost you the same amount, no matter the size of the house, same with septic and stuff. And so you find that a lot of times, for instance, Brad's house, yes, it was, if you look at her price per square foot, it was 2-bedroom, 2-bath, it's only a little over 700 square feet. So it's small. So price per square foot is super high. But what he can bring in, revenue wise, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and from a short-term rental perspective, the value can be really, really good. So I definitely can I encourage people to not necessarily look as much about the price per square foot, and more, how many people can this property sleep, the location, and the view too. I know we've talked about, I have a house closing tomorrow, for 1.7 million, and it's 4-bedroom, 5-bath, but the view is, it's a $500,000 view. As far as all things being equal, if that house was in the middle of the woods, it's worth, $1 million. So the view is going to be, another kind of determinant price that can make the price per square foot, numbers look a little bit jaded.
Cash flow. That's what matters right there, man. To the T. If you can make it cash flow, that's where I base all my investment decisions on. It's like, is this property going to cash flow? Am I securing long-term low interest debt and have adequate cash reserves? Like, price point, square footage really doesn't matter if it makes money. And so that's where I always kind of run in on those. It's like, it's not as fun to talk about as views and all this other fun stuff and the $1 million views you get. But I'm like, hey, if this thing, like the price point supports it from the cash flow it brings in, I'm all for it.
And the only counter to that, but the only thing to think about there, which has helped, is just like, okay, we're valuing these properties from a commercial perspective on how much money it brings in, but is this house going to appraise in some of these small places? And that was something that we maybe was a little bit trickier a year and a half ago. as far as an appraisal gap. Now you have enough people that paid X amount for it that's going to be less of an issue. If someone builds another 800 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, well, you got Brad's house as a comp, or some other houses there's been enough new construction or some other sales as a comp to now say, okay, this house is definitely actually going to appraise from a market value, which again is something that we always kind of have to think about, because we're analyzing these things from a commercial perspective, but residential lenders and appraisers aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. And those $1 million views can contribute and do contribute, not can, they do contribute.
Oh, absolutely.
But you just have to make sure, again, that the numbers work, because sometimes you'll be paying more for a view than what it's actually contributing to the cash flow after a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So one thing, this might be mostly a Joe question. Are these all single families, or do condos work in this market, or are there multifamily options?
Let's go. I'm all about it. My properties are smaller. I got 6 condos up there, kind of all in a row. And I think it's a fantastic condo market across the board. You can still snag something up there that cash flows well, but has the ability to kind of be broken up into smaller units. And so that's kind of my jam. I absolutely love like smaller units that are like really, really well staged, and you're just rolling people in and out the whole time. You've got to love that game to really like dive deep into that. But there are some multifamily options up there. I have found that just the condo options, like it's just a really affordable price point.
Yeah. I agree. I think one reason for that is the lack of hotels in the entire area. Why we don't have as many hotels. A lot of that is zoning laws, out in Avery County. There was a big giant condo complex, 8 stories, that was built on top of Sugar Mountain back in the 80s. And it caused all this upheave because it's ugly. We call it the booger on sugar, and it blocks all the views in all these other places. And so because of that, there's a lot, they really try to they try to protect the views. And so they've added a lot of commercial laws that out in Avery County, you can't go higher than 3 stories unless it's mixed use. And so there's one Best Western in Banner Elk, and it's 1 stories. And so if you're people coming up here to go skiing for the night, a couple, last minute, anyone that's going to stay in a hotel anywhere in the country, coming up here to stay in a hotel, if you want to stay out in Avery County, you can't do, you're going to stay in a condo because there's only 1 hotel. Boone is going to have a couple, a little bit more close to the university, but that's going to be a reason why condos can be super attractive. You see a lot of these old bed and breakfasts, motels that are kind of being bought up by people now and converting into this boutique hotels or short-term rental, kind of running as short-term rentals. They were an old 8-unit multifamily motel that's run down. You're seeing a lot more of that just because the supply of hotels is definitely a little bit lower.
All right. So Joe, yours is condos or townhouses in a row, or what is that you have? Because it's kind of a creative thing, if I remember correctly.
It is. So technically they're condos. And so it was 6 condos right beside each other, but they're built like townhouses. And
but do you own like
complex?
Okay, so you own the whole complex?
Yeah, so I own the whole complex, yeah. And so it's a little 6-unit. And one of my like foundations for investing is options. Options are the most valuable thing that I think you can have. And so for something like that, which is extremely unique and hard to find, you can run those as individual units all at once if you want. And then I also list it as like one large property. So like there's not, like everyone's been saying, there's not a ton of really big properties in Banner Elk. And so like I've got the ability to house 28 people if they all want to be broken up. I don't have a great space for them all to hang out at one spot, which I'm finding is a little bit more difficult because people want to like bring tables and chairs and put them in my parking lot, which is just not going to happen. But that can always get fun. But no, it's cool to have multiple exit strategies. And so if the larger property doesn't book, because I keep that one open a year and a half out in the future, I only keep the smaller units open about 6 months. And so if the big one doesn't book, the little units will fill in and like start supplementing some of that additional income that I wouldn't have generated. And it's just a nice little niche.
Is that a unicorn deal, or are there other things out there similar to that, Garrett?
Yes and no. That was a unicorn deal at the time. Yeah, it's definitely, that was a crazy deal, and it came with a lot of different surprises and stuff. But I wouldn't say it's a unicorn. I mean, there's definitely, I just saw a commercial property, not a little bit more like a hotel. It was an 8 unit out between Boone and Blowing Rock that came for sale and sold the same day with multiple offers for around 600,000. That needed a lot more reno, all 1 bedroom efficiency units. So yeah, you definitely can it's not super common, but there's definitely some commercial multifamilies that were maybe our college rentals that are being converted to kind of short terms that can definitely still pop up.
And let's not sugarcoat it too much because I had 2 units flood over Christmas and all that jazz. There's plenty of things that have gone wrong with the deal, but it is awesome to see a cool deal like that is more of a unicorn, but they all come with their additional problems. And so you're going to just run into different problems as you're buying different asset classes across the board. And so just being prepared to pivot into something when a really good deal hits, a great single family home, a great condo hits, we're huge proponents of jumping on them because it's about cash flow. This case, it just so happened to be, I was trying to buy, 6 units at once, and it just so happened to be a perfect deal for me. But you can make these numbers work kind of across the board.
One more question for you, Joe, before we ask Brad about what he's got. How do you finance something like that if you do come across that?
That was a really interesting one because it was a commercial, kind of a mix between a commercial loan, but it's called a DSCR loan. And so it's a debt service coverage ratio loan. And they have different parameters kind of across the board. But essentially, we went with just a standard 25% down because it was a non-warrantable condo complex in kind of a weird HOA. And so a lot of different pieces had to kind of come together. I ended up using some money from a different HELOC I had of kind of the whole your properties buy properties as you grow. And so the goal isn't just to buy one and be okay, I'm done. The goal is as you're buying more assets that appreciate and continue to grow over time, you can use those properties to creatively finance other deals. And so, but that one was definitely a bear. It took 3 months for us to get that one closed, Garrett. It was crazy.
And I'll add on to that, Avery. There's when you get up, obviously anything over certain units, you're getting into commercial financing, which I would encourage anybody that is that to really kind of study up and learn commercial financing, which I've kind of done over the last year. I have a local lender, commercial lender, who can sometimes even lend on certain residential properties if you can kind of view it as a business. And that's something to think about as well. One of the biggest things is that most commercial paper is going to be 20 years with adjustable rates. And so when you're doing any sort of underwriting, thinking about that, the good news is that a lot of times the underwriters and lenders and even appraisers will use it as, can potentially use short-term rental income. If you're saying it's, kind of like a hotel or a multifamily. And so it can be a little bit easier to get the value. But yeah, you're usually looking at adjustable rates with 20-year notes and commercial. There are some local commercial lenders that I recommend and you can use that can sometimes help you with creative financing on some of these bigger deals.
Awesome. And Joe, did you have to get 6 different DSCR loans for one for each unit, or were you able to get one big one that was all encompassing? Why are you laughing, Garrett?
Because he's laughing because I was in the law office for 5.5 hours signing 673 pages, and I burned through 3 or 4 different pins. And the lawyer had no idea that I was going to be signing. He thought it was just going to be a 30-minute signing, like a normal one. And then my loan package showed up. And no, I had the option to do one big one, which would have saved my wrist, but I wanted to close each one individually so that I had the option to sell them off individually if I wanted to without breaking up the loan. It did end up making it a lot more complicated, but that goes back to the options. I just wanted to have the ability to do that without having to retroactively come back.
Yeah, I think that was smart.
Yeah, that's something. I don't know if you guys do that in Smokies or not, but something that I've encountered and encourage a lot of my clients to do. There's a lot of properties up here that might be on 3 lots. That was, maybe deeded together when they bought it, and there's 2 lots that could potentially be sold off or built on later. And a lot of my clients will, it might cost a little bit more in closing costs, but they'll deed them separately. So they'll deed the house and the loan together, and then they'll buy the other lot for $1 based on the sale of the first house. And so they own that second lot outright. So if they want to sell it off, they can do that. It's not attached to the loan. If they want to build on it and get a construction loan, it's not attached to their actual mortgage on the first property. It's a little bit, all the attorneys up here can do it. You're going to pay a little bit more in closing costs running title searches for the second lot. But a lot of people like that option so they can have other little lots that they own, quote, outright, and it's not attached to the mortgage.
Awesome. Good advice. Brad, let's talk about what you have, because what you have is different than what Joe has. And I don't want to give everyone the impression you have to do this big, crazy, creative deal in order to be successful here. So let's talk about your property there.
All right. So I have a what I would call a small or a large tiny house, if you can envision that, super modern, high end, 2 bed, 2 bath. It's not really a tiny home because it's 800 square feet, maybe, Garrett, or something like that, eight or 900. But it is considered a single family. It's up on the side of a hill with a steep driveway. That was one of the things I was a little nervous about, but it's turned out to be just fine. And the one that I have under contract is just a larger version of the same thing, 3 bedrooms. I tend to think that this market is one that is, I wouldn't go larger than a 3 or 4 bedroom, more than likely, unless you have a specific purpose behind it or you have a specific market that you're chasing. But mine's super close to Boone. It's very convenient. It's 3 minutes from everything. So I'm a little further from where Joe is, where the ski markets are and all that. But I still have people that stay at my place for ski stuff. But it's mostly people around Boone that are coming to mind.
And your sleeps, how many people you said?
I have 6 total that I can sleep. Okay. It's comfortably 4, but technically 6. So I put on my listing that it's for 4. But if I have somebody that has, like my family, if we have a couple with 3 kids, they could easily sleep with the couch very easily. So yep.
Yeah, and you keep your occupancy rate pretty high having a smaller property like that, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it stays very consistent, much more than I expected, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing that, and up here, I'm trying to think. I have Brad's thing pulled up. I don't know if I can share my screen or if this is going to be a video or not. But one of the things that makes Brad Place so sweet is not that it can sleep so many people. It's that the space is so well thought out and really cool that, hey, 4 people, you're still going to garner a really good rate. It's going to be, you might have 2 couples, a couples retreat. And he doesn't need to sleep 6. You don't need to necessarily worry about having the sleeper sofa. You're going to get he's getting all the rates and he's bringing in the revenue, not because, hey, he's able to take people of 6. It's because the parties of 4 are willing to pay a lot more because it's a really cool, unique space that's really well thought out. Joe might even be able to tell you, I know in his complex, he's got 4 2-2s and 2 3-2s. And I'd be interested to see, how much more those 3-2s really do than the 2-2s. Given just an extra bedroom, all things being equal.
Yeah. And I'm going to need a little bit more data before I can give like a precise number, but it does appear that my 3 bedrooms do a little bit better, but like you also still have like higher costs that come along with that. So I've got a little bit higher utilities and whatnot. But Brad, one of the comments I wanted to make is just, I think it's really cool where you have yours placed and where you're able to, you mentioned earlier in the podcast that you're able to pull a lot of these students and like their families, like bringing them like to the university. And I just remember really distinctly, I think it was 65, maybe 70% of my graduating class in high school went to Appalachian State University. And so there's just a huge demand of people coming there. But then at the same time, you've got the football games, you've got the ski slopes, and like you're close enough that a lot of people don't realize this. If you're going up there from Winston, you have to funnel right through there. Like you're going to have to drive right past this property to get to the slopes anyway. And so it's on the way. And so it's just a great way to not necessarily be dependent on the ski slopes and the mountains. Like one like mine is a little bit more like that. Like there's going to be less people that come from Boone specifically to like go to the college games and whatnot because you're closer to the slopes. And so it's a real good happy medium.
Yep, that's right.
No doubt. Yeah. And I know North Carolina is kind of, people think football, they think the SEC. When they think people, college basketball, college basketball is usually like the North Carolina Duke, NC State. App State is, I know we had a big win against Texas A&M this year. Since we've gone like the Division I FBS, like sure, we're not an SEC powerhouse school, but the town kind of and the alumni and this university really gets behind the football team, and it kind of feels a lot bigger than it maybe is to some outside people. One of those things, if you ever go to a game at App State, it's one of those things where you kind of, when you're there in person, you get, you kind of get it. But because a lot of the alumni live so close, it's not like these people that went to Duke and now live all across the country. It's like 80% of the people, the reason they went to App is because the tuition was so cheap and it was in-state tuition. And so they moved to Charlotte, moved to Raleigh. And so You just get, not only do you get people visiting, but you have a lot of people. I even have clients that went to App and are coming back because they went to school there and still live in Charlotte or Raleigh. And so you kind of get a little bit of recycled people with the university. I know you get the families, you get the people that are currently in the university, along with all the staff, and then the people that, alumni that still lives very close.
Yeah, that's awesome that you can kind of double dip like that. I like that. I like that market diversity a little bit for sure. All right, guys. Anything else about why you might want to buy in the high country that we haven't hit that you think our listeners might need to know about?
Closing remarks. I really do need to re-hit on the mountain coaster here because I don't think we gave it enough screen time. All right. It is incredible. It's the closest one for anywhere. So if you've been on like a real big one, you probably won't feel that way. But
wait, is it the kind that you're on like a little sled and you have the brakes, the hand brake?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. You control it. And it's just pedal to the metal right there.
I don't know if we're talking about the same one, and this might be bad for my business, but I'm pretty sure they had like an accident at that.
Oh my gosh. Are you serious?
The one in Banner Elk right there?
Yeah, the one right there.
Oh my gosh. Got a really cool like glass frame. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there was some sort of like
somebody flew off.
I don't think anyone died or anything, but something. I mean,
I've heard that about some of the ones in the Smokies. I'll hear every now and then somebody flew off of it. I mean, that happens.
That just adds to the fun, guys.
I don't know the geography.
That's why I'm on the mountain coaster here. All right. I'm here to get the rush.
Yeah, roller coasters are. I mean, if you're not in Disney World or Disneyland, it's kind of like eating seafood in the mountains. It's like,
I will say, I've never been to Disney World or Disneyland, and I've never even been to Carowinds. So
that checks out then.
Yeah, this is kind of my high.
Joe's pinnacle is the mountain coaster in Banner Oak.
It really is. It's incredible.
It's the climate for the mountain coaster. For sure, the climate. It's the climate. You live in Tennessee in the summertime. It's the climate.
Yeah. No, I will say, and I tell my clients all the time, again, it is not from a cash flow perspective, not from an investment perspective. Obviously, we wouldn't, and none of us would be in this conversation if it wasn't for the Smokies being as much of a powerhouse rental town as it is. But I would say that my area, with all of my clients that own in both areas, it's my area is where people want to spend more time at their own personal property. And so it can be, the good news there is that it can be a really good opportunity for somebody that lives semi-close. I would say the majority of my clients are semi-close. Well, sure, you can still make money everywhere, but the people that are closer, that are a lot more attracted to the area because they know they're going to spend a lot more time there. And the flip side, there's a lot of people that maybe are from North Carolina. Maybe they hate skiing and snowboarding, and so they know, hey, the high season is going to be the wintertime. I can rent it out. And in the summertime, it might be a little bit slower because people are going to the beach, but that's when I want to be up there. So they're not losing as much revenue coming up there in the summertime or some of their areas that they like. And so I know we don't always talk about using it as a second home, but I definitely think my area is an area that if you do live close, you find yourself, your biggest hurdle is not being able to afford to go to your own rental because you want to go up there all the time.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. Guys, if you want to buy with us with the short-term shop with Garrett in the high country, email us at agents@theshorttermshop.com and we will hook you up. Or if you have more questions, maybe you want to compare and contrast some different markets and ask some questions, we have a weekly free, we call it office hours Q&A that you can sign up for at strquestions.com. And also be sure to join our Facebook group called Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. Thanks so much for being on, guys.
Thanks, Avery.
Thanks for having us.